A child reaches out her hand. A wolf doesn't run. It sniffs her fingers. And in that single moment, one unremarkable moment in the mud of prehistoric Europe, something changes forever. Not just for them, for every human being who will ever live after. Right now, there are more pets on Earth than there are people. 90 million dogs in the United States alone. 45 million cats. And that's before you count the fish, the birds, the reptiles kept in heated glass boxes in suburban living rooms. We spend over $150 billion a year keeping animals alive that don't feed us, don't protect our crops, don't carry our weight. They just exist, and we love them. But nobody ever told us to do this. No civilization invented it. No religion commanded it. It just happened. The question is, when? And the answer reaches back further than almost anyone realizes, and it is stranger than you'd expect. For most of human prehistory, wolves and humans were competitors. Same prey, same territory, same hunger. A wolf near your camp at night wasn't a pet, it was a threat. A direct threat to your food, your children, your survival. You didn't approach wolves, you drove them off, or you killed them. But somewhere between 15,000 and 40,000 years ago, scientists still argue about the exact number. Something shifted. The leading theory isn't romantic. It's cold and practical. Wolves began following human hunting parties. Not out of affection, out of strategy. Humans left scraps. Wolves ate them. Wolves that were bold enough to follow close got more food than the ones who stayed back. And humans, over time, noticed something useful. When wolves were near, they got early warnings. A sudden growl. A shift in posture. Predators approaching from a direction no human eye had caught. It was a transaction, not a friendship. A biological coincidence that happened to benefit both sides. But here's the thing about transactions that repeat over thousands of years. They stop being transactions. They become something else. The wolves that were least aggressive toward humans survived longer. They got more food. They had more pups. Those pups were slightly less fearful, slightly more curious, slightly more willing to take scraps from an open hand. And then, at some point that no one recorded because no one could write yet, a human did something that had probably never happened before in the history of life on Earth. They fed a wolf on purpose. Not because it helped them hunt, not because it scared predators away, just because it was there, and it looked at them, and something in their chest moved. In 1914, in a cave in Belgium called Goyet, archaeologists found a skull, 14,000 years old, unmistakably dog, not wolf. Already reshaped by thousands of years of living alongside humans. Shorter snout, wider jaw, different entirely. But here is the detail that almost nobody talks about. It wasn't found alone. It was buried, carefully, which raises a question that is harder to answer than it sounds. Why would a primitive human, a person fighting every single day just to stay alive, waste time grieving an animal? If that question pulls at you the way it pulled at me, stay with it, because the answer runs deeper than anyone expected. The oldest confirmed pet burial in the world is in northern Israel, a site called Ein Malaha. 12,000 years ago, archaeologists uncovered a human skeleton, an elderly individual, probably a woman, curled on her side, and beneath her left hand resting against her palm, the bones of a puppy. The position wasn't accidental. Someone placed that hand there. Someone chose that arrangement before the earth was closed. That puppy hadn't protected a village. It hadn't hunted. It was young, too young to have been useful in any practical way. It died before it could have contributed anything to the people around it. And someone loved it enough to bury it like family, to put it to rest like it deserved rest. This is the moment historians point at, not the moment humans domesticated animals. That took thousands of years and had nothing to do with love. This is the moment humans started to feel something for them, something irrational, something that cost them and they chose to pay it anyway. And once that switch flipped, it never turned back off. Dogs make a certain kind of sense. Wolves were already nearby. The biology was compatible. The relationship had a logic you can trace. But humans didn't stop with wolves. Archaeological sites across Europe, Asia, and the Americas show evidence of early humans keeping foxes, ravens, cranes, monkeys, deer. In one documented site in prehistoric Austria, a bear cub, not always to eat, not always for any purpose anyone can clearly explain, sometimes just to keep close. So the question becomes something harder. What is it in the human brain that looks at a wild animal and feels pull? The answer is more complicated, and maybe darker than you'd think. Anthropologists have a name for the central contradiction here. They call it the pet-keeping paradox. Every animal kept as a pet is, in some sense, a luxury your survival logic cannot afford. It eats food you could eat. It demands time you could spend hunting or building or sleeping. It gets sick and you care for it, which costs you more. And yet, across every culture ever studied, on every continent, in every era of recorded and unrecorded history, humans keep animals, not for utility, for something else. Evolutionary biologist James Serpell spent decades studying this pattern. He found that in virtually every hunter-gatherer society ever documented, people brought young animals back to camp, orphaned fawns, baby birds knocked from nests, fox cubs found after a hunt. Women sometimes nursed them alongside their own infants. Children played with them for hours. These animals almost never became food. They were given names. They were spoken to. They were mourned when they died. And when the group moved, as nomadic people must, following prey across hundreds of miles, they sometimes carried these animals with them, wrapped in skins, carried in arms, adding weight, adding risk, because the alternative, leaving them behind, felt impossible. Serpell's conclusion was blunt. He said the impulse to keep animals is not learned behavior. It is not cultural. It appears to be embedded in the human brain at a level so deep it predates civilization itself, and neuroscience has started to explain why. When an animal looks at you with soft, rounded eyes that are slightly too large for its face, your brain activates the same circuits it uses to process an infant's face. The same release of oxytocin, the same pull of protection. Your brain is being slightly fooled, and it doesn't care. It just feels like love, and it acts accordingly. If you're finding this as fascinating as I did researching it, subscribe and leave a like. It keeps this channel alive, and it means we can keep going deeper into stories exactly like this one. But here is where the story turns darker. Because not all early animal keeping was warm. Not all of it was an accident of empathy. Some of it was deliberate, strategic, and deeply unsettling. In ancient Mesoamerica, at sites like Teotihuacan, archaeologists have uncovered something that doesn't fit the companion animal story. Animals kept in small stone enclosures, wolves, pumas, eagles, fed carefully, kept alive deliberately, not as pets, not as livestock, as ritual objects, alive specifically to be killed at the right moment, sacrificed to mark seasons, victories, deaths of rulers. In ancient Egypt, the scale was almost incomprehensible. Millions of animals bred in captivity and mummified as offerings to the gods. Millions. Cats for Bastet, ibises for Thoth, crocodiles for Sobek. Entire industries existed just to breed, kill, wrap, and sell sacred animals to pilgrims. DNA analysis of these mummies has revealed something disturbing. Many were killed before they reached adulthood. Necks broken, skulls crushed, sometimes the very day they were purchased. The line between pet, prisoner, and offering was never clear. And some researchers now believe the very first domesticated animals, kept before the bond became emotional, before the burials, before the names, were kept because early humans believed certain animals carried spiritual power. That keeping them close meant controlling that power, borrowing it. The first pet by this theory wasn't a companion, it was a hostage. But then something shifted again, as it always does with humans, because whatever the original reason, utility, transaction, ritual, fear, the bond itself became the point. There's a burial site in Germany called Oberkassel, 14,000 years ago. A man and a woman, buried together in a single grave, and beside them the remains of a dog. This dog had been severely ill in the weeks before it died. Bone analysis shows it suffered from canine distemper for at least 3 weeks before death. During those 3 weeks, it would have been useless. It couldn't hunt, couldn't guard, couldn't work. It was a burden, completely in every practical sense. But someone had kept it alive. Fed it when it couldn't feed itself. Nursed it through pain. In a world where humans were themselves going hungry through winter. In a world where every calorie meant survival. Someone chose to spend those calories on a dying dog. Not because it made sense, because they couldn't let it go. And when it finally died, they buried it with the people it had lived beside. Like it belonged there, because to them it did. For 40,000 years, humans have been making this same irrational choice, choosing connection over calculation, feeding something that cannot feed them back, grieving something the world said didn't matter. Every time you look at an animal and feel something you can't quite explain and don't need to, you are doing exactly what your ancestors did around a fire 15,000 years ago. Maybe that's not a flaw in our wiring. Maybe that's the whole point of us.